What is a consumer society, and is it really as bad as they say it is? This phenomenon has many critics, but there are also supporters. What is a consumer society? This is a type of social arrangement in which people buy more goods and services than they need. In such a society, people tend not to save money, but to spend it on various goods. With the help of purchasers, consumers are trying to get closer to some ideal of a prosperous life. For example, to have a place to live, a car, good clothes, expensive jewelry, delicious food and vacation abroad. The thing becomes primarily a symbol of security and status, as well as a means of self-expression. So a person can use the technology of a single manufacturer, ignoring the rest. Although the taste is practically the same, the consumer society developed in the developed countries of the West after the end of World War I, when there was a massive transition to conveyor production. Automation has made it possible to create a large number of cheap goods available to the general public. People began to acquire houses, cars, household appliances, and companies began to offer more and more things and services. As a result, consumption from periodic became permanent, and this type of society spread almost all over the world. There is an opinion that in the current era, the consumer society has been replaced by the society of experiences. But, in fact, it is no different globally. With him, people no longer strive to possess status items, but they are eager to tell others about their busy lives. For example, you can not just post photos from the beach on social networks, but show that you have received an atypical experience. They made a pilgrimage to the eastern sages, descended into hermit caves, or bungee jumped. What advantages does the consumer society have? It provides economic and political stability. Mass consumption made it possible to avoid both overproduction crises, when there are too many goods and no one needs them, and shortages. Constant demand, on the one hand, leads to the fact that products do not linger, and on the other hand, does not allow to inflate prices for them. This has made the work of enterprises more sustainable, and many people have received a stable source of income. It motivates people. First, consumption forces companies to improve, reduce the cost of production, create new products, or expand the functionality of the old one. After all, people's requests are growing, and competitors are not asleep. This contributes to progress. Even 20 years ago, it was only possible to make calls from mobile phones, and few could afford such a device. Today, almost everyone has a smartphone in which you can find everything: internet, notebook, photo and video camera, and much more. Secondly, consumers themselves tend to earn more in order to buy more expensive things and live better. To do this, people try to get a good education, become a professional in their field, and take a high position. That is, they are developing. Therefore, it makes people calmer and more tolerant. The consumer society, according to its supporters, allows meeting the basic needs of the majority of the population. Even those who do not belong to the middle class usually do not need food, clothing, and shelter. As a result, there are significantly fewer completely disenfranchised and disadvantaged people. Social tension is decreasing and the number of conflicts is decreasing. But there are also claims against the consumer society. It makes a person dependent on things. In a consumer society, the standard economic axiom demand begets supply is reversed. Now supply imposes demand. It is no longer the need that forces people to purchase goods, but the presence of these very goods. Advertising and the example of others make them spend money. Moreover, the purchase can be absolutely useless, and the pleasure of the purchase is only momentary. Therefore, critics of the consumer society declare that there can be no genuine democracy under it. Business uses advertising and the media to manipulate people's minds for its own purposes, and creates a special kind of exploitation and totalitarianism. Marketing shapes people's tastes, desires, values, norms, and interests. For example, he draws images of an ideal family, parents, childhood, youth, and life in general. Advertising surrounds a person everywhere, from flyers at the bus stop to banners on internet sites. At the same time, it adapts to the consumer, changes with him, and he gradually stops noticing how his needs and tastes begin to depend directly on advertising. This negates the practical value of things. It is replaced by a consumer and demonstrative one. When a product is bought not for its utilitarian properties, but for the opportunity to boast of an expensive product, there are margins for the brand. The concept of using things is changing. People no longer repair them in case of breakage or wear, but buy new ones. As a result, consumer goods become obsolete and go out of fashion faster than they lose functionality. Purchases themselves are more likely to become impulsive and unplanned. Kitsch items are becoming widespread, useless things like spinners, avalanche-like gaining popularity, and visiting shopping malls turns into a form of leisure and entertainment. Some people even develop oniomania, an uncontrollable passion for shopping. All this devalues the results of work and study. If a person lives only for consumption, his interests, goals and aspirations cease to matter. After all, then they get a good education only for the sake of a well-paid position, but they work to get more money. In this case, there is no question of development and self-realization. As a result, a person does not enjoy work and study and does not appreciate the process itself. In addition, it is very harmful to nature. More and more natural resources are being used to produce new goods, and factories and their products are increasingly polluting the planet. So, the car will not go without gasoline, and synthetic fabric cannot be created without oil-containing materials. If the rate of consumption increases and worldwide approaches the level of developed countries, in the near future we may face depletion of natural resources and global climate change. The European Environment Agency estimates that by the end of the 21st century, the global average temperature could rise by 6.4 degrees Celsius, and this threatens the melting of glaciers, flooding of coastal areas, droughts and other negative consequences. The consumer society supports social inequality. Due to the endless need to produce all new goods, rich states have practically exhausted their own resources. They compensate for their lack at the expense of poorer countries in which consumption has not yet reached the same level. The latter become sources of raw materials and cheap labor, with the help of which goods are produced. Most of them go to developed countries, while developing countries receive almost nothing. So, in 2018, the Euro Union imported 6 times more materials than it exported. In pursuit of cheap power, corporations are building factories in poor countries. Companies save on everything, so working on such conveyors is especially difficult. Moreover, unlimited consumption deprives you of a sense of personal responsibility. The culture of the consumer society is impersonal. Corporations are blamed for what is happening, not individuals. If many people know about greedy capitalists, then less is written about ordinary consumers, who provide companies with profits. As a result, people do not feel personally responsible for the negative consequences of consumer society. For example, consumers are unlikely to feel guilty that factories are smoking, planters are cutting down forests to plant coffee, and workers' rights in third world countries are being violated, although all this happens for the consumer and for his money. In addition, such consumption can lead to a crisis. Opponents of the consumer society consider the existing stability to be illusory and fragile. For example, they note that spending on goods and services is constantly increasing, sometimes overtaking the growth of household incomes. This is facilitated by a well-developed credit system. But inflating consumption for the sake of even more consumption cannot happen indefinitely. Depletion of resources will lead to shortages, and uncontrolled lending will lead to the depreciation of money. As a result, a crisis of such magnitude may occur, which did not exist before, when people will fight for food and starve to death, while endless rows of coffee makers and televisions gather dust on store shelves. In one way or another, we are all part of this society and are unlikely to be able to completely abandon it. Despite all the disadvantage, it has been successfully existing for many years. However, the consumer society does create acute problems. First of all, environmental issues. If you want to contribute to the fight against them, try to become a conscious consumer and follow a minimalistic strategy. This does not mean that you need to give up shopping altogether. You just need to learn how to make them wisely. In any case, you can try. For example, leave only what you really need. Try to put all the items in the house in boxes and live like this for a month. Most likely, you will realize that you have not even looked into most of the boxes. Perhaps you simply don't need any of them. Before you buy something, try to postpone the purchase. For example, for a few weeks. If you really need the item, then you will not change your mind and return to the store. Otherwise, you will forget about it, which means that the product was not so necessary. Have fun. Don't chase after him. Read books. Eat. And shop slowly. Often we consume too much only because we are afraid of not being able to do something in this life. But in the pursuit of the joys of life, you can lose your taste for it. Strive to produce more than consume. This way you will not only use this world, but also transform it. For example, get creative. It's especially good if you learn how to give new life to old things. These tips will not only make you a more responsible consumer, but also help you save money and time. But we would not say that the consumer society is an absolute evil and humanity is flying into the abyss. But we would pay attention to the fact that consumption allows you to create conditions that are more and more comfortable, but not only from the point of view of things, but also from the point of view of arranging the world around a person, which allows you to form your personality, develop her in more favorable conditions. An attentive attitude to excessive consumption can guide society on the right path, develop it in every possible way and make everything safer.